Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Okay, welcome back, and I have in the studio with us Steve Johnson, Polina Leiser, and we want to kind of continue on with our quick conversation we had with Dr. Alex McFarland, and who's an apologist. You know what's interesting? He said something. He came right out and said it. This whole thing is demonic. It is an attempt to for Satan to neutralize gender identity or biblical gender identity. We quoted earlier the article from the psychiatrist in chief at Johns Hopkins Hospital, Dr. Paul McHugh, and he is going on to say that this is a mental disorder, and those who actually go through with all of the surgery and everything have a 20 times higher rate of suicide.
Yeah, I knew that it was high. I didn't realize it was that high. That's high. That's alarming.
So, and others will tell you, that people that I've had on the air, that will say that the whole issue of homosexuality stems from some kind of a trauma early on in life. Now, that could have been a result of an abuse, a physical abuse, certainly an emotional abuse. But there is no medical community out there saying that any of this is natural. And now when you have a leading psychiatrist coming out and making a statement, which I'm glad he's done this, because you wonder now if the rest of the psychological community is going to support them.
Yeah, it will be fascinating, because they've been pretty quiet, I think, for the most part. You know, the concern I have is this. There are so many levels that you will see people talking about it, because those people who are applauding this will do so at all cost and use whatever justification they can. So in other words, let me give you an example. If you find, let's say, a qualified individual who happens to have been reported by Fox News, they'll say, well, that's just Fox News giving it a slant. Okay, so right there they're trying to change the discussion as opposed to looking at the evidence. The other is this: if you start talking about saying, well, this is against God, which I think a lot of us would agree with that. The difficulty with that argument is that somebody will say, well, I don't believe in your God, so now it's okay. No, that's not really the conclusion, but do you see how it diffuses the discussion? This is why I think to have a conversation that is helpful needs to really be thought out, because you're going to find yourself in quicksand saying, well, I didn't really say what I wanted to say, or I said it and they took it a different way. This is going to be difficult, and I don't think it's going to be easy at all.
All right, Polina, do you think political correctness is intimidating those of us who have a biblical moral worldview from speaking out?
Yes, and I think we just don't know what to do. I think as Christians we don't know how to handle the issue, just like homosexuality. And we feel like there's a separation. If you're homosexual, you can't be Christian. If you're transgender, you can't be Christian. And Bruce Jenner identified himself as a Republican and as a Christian. So how do we deal with that as a church? And I think going back to the psychiatrist who said that it's a mental illness, I think it's great that he said it, because now we have to realize that with so many suicides and with the surgery only masking the underlying problem, all these people need our help. And so the church needs to be accepting of people like that, so that they feel safe. We don't have to agree with them, and we don't have to accept what they did. But I think somehow, somewhere, we have to find a way for those people to feel safe in church and be able to deal with those underlying problems, so that they can eventually deal with what's on the surface.
Well, and you know, I think she points to a good aspect, that to do that, you have to have a dialogue. You have to have a discussion. You have to have somebody. I'm sorry, pastors are going to have to stand up. I don't know how you'll be able to be neutral in this issue. I think we've come to a point now where something's going to have to be, the line in the sand is there, and you're going to have to make a statement to say, if I believe one way or the other, and because of that, some sort of a resolve has to be in place. And I think those pastors can't assume, as we talked earlier, that the people in their church are sitting there understanding what the issue really is.
The danger that's popping up now is, and I think, Polina, you hit on it, we got to figure out a way to say the church is a safe place for you to come to. But are we saying that you can identify yourself as a Christian without changing your life? And so you invite them in, but if they don't change, if there isn't that change because you've had an encounter with Christ, then what are we doing here?
But the change happens while, I mean, if we say that, we're going to be so hypocritical, because there are so many sinners in the church who have not changed yet, but they're in the process. And they may be changed until the moment they face Christ and, you know, they're dead. So with the transsexual people, we can be like, okay, you guys have to change before you come in, while everybody else is changing in the process.
All right.
Yeah, yes, totally, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So we invite them in because we want them to experience the love of God.
Just like anybody.
Okay.
Because
anybody.
they are
Yeah.
anybody, yeah. We all have problems.
So we all have, and I don't mean to categorize them because the church is full of sick people. You come to church because your life's messed up. But the risk is, do we go too far? Case in point, a church that I know in California has kind of got themselves in a sticky wicket because they allowed for a gay couple to sing in the choir, while at the same time a couple that's living together can't sing in the choir. What are we doing to ourselves?
No, I agree. Well, look, these are man-made rules. This has nothing to do with who God is and the relationship with Him. So, yeah, they have to deal with that. And I think that's a good point. Have we put in some sort of weird requirements that allow you to do something or nothing? Look, if you have, and let me just finish that, without any kind of really religious resolve to it all. If you have somebody who is in need of care, you need to give them care before you enable them into another capacity. That's what I would say. I mean, it could be anything. It could be anybody with any kind of a known sin that needs to be resolved. We are all sinners. I think that what Christ has done for us, if we accept it, we're on the road to having that relationship with Him. If we continue in that sin, that's a problem. You wouldn't enable that person then. I would say just like what you're talking about, you don't enable it and you don't make weird exceptions.
And it's that hypocrisy that those in the gay community will throw back at the church.
Sure.
Saying, your church is full of sinners and you haven't even fixed them, so why are you telling me how to live?
Yeah.
You're not even calling their sin, but you're calling my lifestyle sin. You know?
Like I say, I think this is a singular point where we have to start looking at everything we do. Plus, pastors are going to have to come out and talk about the situation as it is and where Christians stand on that.
And be honest about it.
Yes,
if it's a sin,
open
it's
discussion.
a sin. Doesn't mean you tell the person, go and deal with it yourself, but you have to call things the way they are. And another thing is, I lost my thought. Let me think about it.
While you were saying that, you know what this reminded me of? This isn't some category to say this is anything like politics or anything like that.
No.
This isn't. We are beyond any of those marginalized discussions that might be going on. We're talking about the essence of the faith and what we believe. It reminds me of the Catholic Church where Nancy Pelosi, for example, said, well, she's Catholic, but she believes in abortion. And the Catholic archbishops and so on were saying, well, you do realize to be what we determine to be a Catholic, you cannot be in favor of abortion. I mean, that is the stance of the church. Now, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not endorsing it or denying it or whatever. But that caused some of those who were like Nancy Pelosi or others to have to now make an evaluative process. You just can't be everything without a commitment to what the essence of that belief is.
Okay, because I think that what Dr. McFarland said there is that those who have same-sex attraction in this country, most people will think it's probably up around 40–50%. He's saying it's actually about 3%.
I've heard it's even lower than that because
but
of how
those who
they've
act upon it, bring the number down to just right around 1%.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
right.
So why are we as Christians being intimidated to not say anything about this particular issue? Because the rhetoric that I hear among Christianity is that we've already accepted him as a person who has a same-sex attraction. We're already calling Bruce Jenner a she. We've already jumped over the line in trying to find some kind of safe place so that we can have the dialogue, while at the same time we're capitulating to the problem.
Well, I think what's happened, because the church in general, and I mean I'm including myself in it, has not had a point of reference to say, here's what we believe and why we believe it in these instances, that you've had a situation take control instead of the church say, We kind of, this is nothing new. It's happened in the Old Testament. We can point to it all. And this is what we believe and why we believe it. I'm not seeing, I'm sorry, but I'm just not seeing those leaders, except like Alex McFarland, come out and say that. Because this is nothing new. We've seen this problem before.
Polina, do you think we've lost the fear of God in Christianity? In other words, if the church is full of people who have a closet full of sin after they have supposedly been converted, you know, and we're all sinners. We do it every day. But if we're not calling sin sin, and we're not calling that we don't have a fear of God, so to speak, to change, then anything goes. We're going to allow anybody in. Yeah, it's a safe place. Come on in. You can be a part of us, and which is great. I understand that, and a lot of churches are going to preach grace, and we should do that too. But are we seeing the conversion and the change into a new life?
I think you answered your own question, and I do believe that, and the reason why we're losing that fear of God in the way, because there is no accountability in the church. You know, I come from the tradition where we do have confession, and traditionally it is, you know, you confess one to another, and you confess to God in front of, you know, in my case it would be a priest, but he represents the church. And so in a way I voice my sins. I'm accountable to God, but also I know that it's not just, because it's so easy to make deals with God when it's just you and him.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have done that, and maybe even, you know, Bruce Jenner, I'm sure he's confessed whatever, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming whatever is in his heart, and he probably somehow figured it out that it's okay. What would it be like if he was actually in a situation, whether it's a one-on-one counseling or a group thing, whatever it is that the church implements, whatever denomination you're from, where you would have that kind of accountability? I guess I'm just thinking of practical things we can do if they're already not in place.
Well, and I was just going to say this feeds into a little bit of what you were saying, Perry, is that when somebody comes into the church, you welcome them in, but then there's a mentoring aspect. There's also that aspect where you are working with them. You don't just leave them to be. This is where the shepherding comes into play. And I think that's important. I think churches have to do this.
Well,
you know?
I think the societal pressure on the church to shut up, which includes in particular this issue, and by being forced to shut up, we're also shut up on every other sin that's out there. And so we'll just preach a happy message. We'll preach a God loves you and blesses you message without change.
Yeah.
So the born again experience is watered down to just a verbal confession, not an actual transformation. And it somewhat bothers me. But if the psychological community, now this guy's not representing the church, he's representing the psychological community, is saying, wait a minute, this is not normal. This is a mental disorder. This could rock the world of this whole issue if this sees the light of day. You know, so I
think in the meantime, we as Christians and pastors are going to have to decide how to respond. I don't think no response is an appropriate response. You know, you think of the prophets in the Old Testament and how they were called upon to, this is a time to say what's in the Scripture and just reflect on that. I think we have to do that. And the pressure is going to be on, I think, pastors and church leaders on this. And all of us, really.
And I think, well, personally, when I think about those issues, whether it's abortion, homosexuality, transgenders, I always ask myself, did God make a mistake? Did he accidentally, you know, just kind of looked away and you were born the wrong gender? And when you think about that and you realize that maybe, you know, I guess I'm thinking, how do you talk to those people? It's your cross to bear. That's what you talk. He saw
you before you were even conceived.
You know,
in your mother's
how do you deal
womb,
with the special needs kids?
Yeah.
You know, it's a tragedy, and it's a cross that you bear for the rest of your life. But that's something that you were appointed by God to do.
I do think this whole issue goes back to something I've said earlier, and that is the church is going to have to take responsibility for sex education. We shouldn't just abandon that issue and give it to the public school.
Yeah.
I think the church is going to have to come back to this issue, take on sex education, deal with youth pastors and parents, and begin to deal with biblical gender identity. What it means biblically to be a male, what it means biblically to be a female. But when we kind of just threw up our hands on that because we considered anything sexual to be dirty, we gave it to the public school system, and now the public school system wants to take your kids at any age and take them to an adult bookstore and call that sex education. Yeah.
And I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to share something. Alex mentioned suicides. We talked about suicides. I had that experience in my family. Close friends of ours had a son born who later said that he's a girl. He's always felt like he was a girl. He was a little older than me. And parents had resources, so they helped him, you know, as any parent would, try to make the child happy. So they helped the boy do the surgery and help him throughout his life. He later moved to the United States, where he felt the freedom was more accompanying to his desires. She committed suicide 2 years ago. And
Well,
I just know that it's tragic for family. And so it's hard to talk about it, because I know firsthand how tragic it is for his mom and for his dad to deal with this.
Sure.
And yet I know that he was so alone, and there was no one who was brave enough to talk to him, who was even kind enough to love him.
See, and I think this is the response the church has to come with on so many levels, including that one there. Yeah.
He went on to say, Dr. McHugh from Johns Hopkins Hospital, he goes on to say, listen to this is absolutely stunning, that after a Vanderbilt University in London clinic, children who had expressed transgender feelings, but for whom over time 70 to 80% spontaneously lost those feelings. So in time, as they get older, they come out of it. And I have seen this. This is why in same-sex marriages, you are seeing the divorce rate to be as high as anything else, and you're seeing the singleness rate at older age to be high as anything else. So anyway, we're not going to solve it all in one day, but interesting, and we'll keep on it. Thank you both for coming in. Coming up next, I think you're going to really enjoy our time together with Kevin Palau. We'll be right back.